Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality characteristics that may be at work in the Drew Peterson murder case. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. So first I'll take a look at the background of Drew Peterson and the crimes, then take a look at the trial, and then get to the mental health and personality characteristics. So starting with the background and the crimes. Drew Peterson was born in 1954. While in high school, he met a woman named Carol Brown. In 1974, they married, and they would have 2 sons together. Shortly after graduating from high school, he went into the Army. In 1977, Drew Peterson started his career as a police officer in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Carol Brown and Drew Peterson would divorce in 1980 due to Peterson's infidelity. Peterson would remarry in 1982. His second wife, Victoria Connolly, indicated that Peterson was violent and threatened to kill her and make it look like an accident. Peterson's second marriage would end in 1992. Just 2 months later, he would marry the person he was cheating with before his divorce. Her name was Kathleen Savio. Drew Peterson and Kathleen would have 2 sons together, but their marriage really didn't work out. Their divorce would be finalized on October 10, 2003. Peterson married again on October 18, 2003, so just 8 days later. His fourth wife was named Stacy Kales. She was 19 years old at that time. Peterson was 49. They would have a son and a daughter together. On March 1, 2004, Peterson was returning his sons to Kathleen after a visitation. Peterson discovered that Kathleen's door was locked and she wouldn't answer it. He asked a neighbor for help. She promptly contacted a locksmith who unlocked the door. As Peterson was getting ready to enter the house, he asked the neighbor to go first, saying that he didn't want any trouble. The neighbor discovered Kathleen unresponsive, sitting in an empty bathtub. Kathleen's hair was soaked with blood. Peterson's status as a Bolingbrook police officer meant that the Illinois State Police would investigate Kathleen's death, right? So in theory, that wouldn't create the same type of conflict of interest. After the investigation, the coroner ruled that Kathleen died as a result of accidental drowning. This takes us to October 29, 2007. Peterson's fourth wife, Stacy, 23 at this time, was reported missing by her sister. Peterson claimed that Stacy was in a relationship with another man and ran off with him. He even said that Stacy called him the night of October 28, saying that she was leaving him. It was only at this point when people started looking at Kathleen's death as suspicious. Was it a coincidence that Peterson's third wife was dead and his fourth wife was missing? Right? So they were starting to think to themselves that something could be going on here. Not long after Stacy's disappearance, the media descended on Bolingbrook, Illinois. Peterson was speaking to people like Geraldo Rivera and Matt Lauer. He was on the cover of People magazine. It was clear that he liked being the center of attention. As people started to review the autopsy for Kathleen, it became clear that she had been murdered. The number of external injuries on her body was quite unusual for an accidental drowning. She had oval contusions on her abdomen, a laceration on her scalp, and abrasions on her right wrist. The EMTs who had responded the day her body was found reported there were no clothes and no towels in the bathroom. It seemed a bit unusual that somebody would take a bath without those items nearby. Some interesting information about the way the deaths are examined came to light as well. So Kathleen lived in Will County, and in that venue, the coroner is an elected official. They don't need any qualifications whatsoever. They simply need to be the person who gets the most votes. The way the coroner determines a cause of death is to rely on a detective and potentially a hired medical examiner who prepare a presentation for a jury. This jury, which comprises 6 people, is impaneled for the purpose of determining the cause of death for a few incidents. So it's not the same 6 people permanently. So it's much like the jurors in a low-level criminal trial. The coroner's jury would hear many cases in the same day. The cases are presented to them for about an hour, and then after that they vote homicide, suicide, or accident. One of the people on that jury to rule about Kathleen's death was a police officer who was friends with Peterson. He explained to the other jury members that he thought Peterson was a good police officer. Peterson helped his neighbors. He was kind, generous. It seems like that would have influenced the jury's decision. A juror that knows a defendant would never be permitted in a criminal trial, yet it seemed okay, by the standards here, that this was allowed to happen. The coroner said that he really didn't think about the conflict of interest when he selected the jury, and it never occurred to him to overrule the jury's decision, even though he had the authority to do so. Furthermore, the Illinois State Police detective that was assigned to that investigation never saw Kathleen's body, never talked to Peterson, did not go to the autopsy, and never had actually been at the scene where Kathleen's body was found. November 8, 2007, the state's attorney starts to re-examine the cause of Kathleen's death and names Peterson as a suspect. After this, he resigned from the Bolingbrook Police Department. The new investigation would have two forensic pathologists, one hired by the state and one hired by the family. The one hired by the family was Michael Baden, the famous New York forensic pathologist. Both pathologists determined that Kathleen's death was a homicide. Here we see new evidence comes to light about the day Kathleen's body was discovered. Peterson's second wife, Victoria, stated that Peterson went to a locksmith school and always carried a lockpick set on his person. So if this was true, why did he need to call a locksmith? When the police arrived, Peterson asked them if they would escort him inside the residence so that he could identify the body. Why on earth would they agree to that? This gives Peterson the ability to say, look, the reason that my fingerprints or hair or whatever else is found on this crime scene is because I went in there to identify the body, right? This is crime scene contamination. Really an unbelievable error on the part of the police. Then we see this information about the minister who had spoken to Stacy 3 years after Kathleen's death. Stacy told him that on the night before Kathleen's body was discovered, she caught Peterson in the laundry room, dressed in all black, putting women's clothes into the washing machine. When Stacy inquired as to what he was doing, he said, "You know where I've been. I was taking care of the problem. It will be the perfect crime." That statement seems inculpatory, right? That doesn't look good for him. Peterson told Stacy to maintain the story that he was with her in bed all night, right? So Stacy became Peterson's alibi. Evidence was discovered regarding Stacy's disappearance as well. On October 28, the day before Stacy was reported missing, Peterson met with his stepbrother, Thomas Morphy, at a local donut shop. Peterson left his phone on the table and told Morphy not to answer it. After Peterson walked away, Morphy then saw that that phone was ringing and Stacy's name came up as the caller. So Peterson was fabricating evidence to corroborate his story. Later that evening, one of Peterson's neighbors sees Peterson and Morphy pulling a blue plastic barrel out of Peterson's house and putting it into Peterson's SUV. Morphy would later say that the barrel was warm to the touch and weighed about 120 pounds. After Stacy was reported missing, Morphy would attempt to end his own life, believing that he had assisted Peterson in disposing of Stacy's body. It makes me wonder, it never occurred to him before that he could be disposing of a body? Because I think the whole 120-pound warm barrel thing would really give it away. Either way, we see that Peterson was indicted in May of 2009 for the murder of Kathleen. This takes us to the trial. The trial is actually quite challenging in this case for the prosecution. They really didn't have enough evidence to convict Peterson of killing Kathleen unless they were allowed to use hearsay statements that allegedly originated with Stacy. Eventually, several of those statements were allowed into evidence, right? So here we see that they're trying Peterson for Kathleen's death, but not Stacy's death. As far as I know, no one has ever been charged in connection with Stacy's disappearance. Now we move to September 2012. Peterson was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to 38 years. Yet amazingly, this would not be his last conviction or his longest prison sentence. In February 2015, he was charged with solicitation of murder for attempting to hire somebody to kill the lead prosecutor from his murder trial. In May 2016, he was found guilty and sentenced to 40 years in prison. It appears that he was worried that that prosecutor was eventually going to bring charges against him for Stacy's murder. We see that Peterson is eligible for parole in 2081. Now moving to the mental health and personality characteristics that may be at work in a case like this. We see that Peterson really liked giving interviews, right? He gave a number of interviews to many different people. we see some interesting statements that he made before and after he was in prison. So before prison, he makes this statement: "I control my family. I think more people in America should control their family," right? So it doesn't even seem like he's trying to appear not guilty. I think this really indicates a disconnect, like he saw himself a certain way and he didn't realize how statements like that would be interpreted. After he was in prison, he said that he regretted getting married. He's not the only one. He said, "I would have stayed a bachelor for sure. It's just like every time I fell in love with somebody and tried to make a life with them, things didn't work out." It was probably because of the murder. If he had removed the murder component from his marriages, they probably would have been a lot easier. We see this mentality here where Peterson believes himself to be a victim. He was just trying to make a life with them by taking their lives. Somehow this made sense to him. He also said that he believes Stacy could show up. Now, of course, it seems likely that Peterson killed Stacy. There's no way to know for sure. He hasn't confessed to it, and he does have a presumption of innocence. But it's still interesting to think that he would put that out there, almost like he's just looking for attention. He's trying to say something that will be published in the media. Similarly, I'm to understand he will be appealing his murder for higher conviction. It may be because he thinks that he can get overturned and then somehow overturn the first conviction, although I think he's out of appeals for that first one. Or it could be that he wants to stay in the limelight, right? He just simply likes the attention. I think what I find interesting about Peterson is that he really was not an effective criminal, yet he almost got away with murder. He really relied on the incompetence of others, law enforcement, the coroner, really the entire system. It was a team effort. If Peterson was not a police officer, he would have not gotten away with the first murder. He would have been caught right away. It's like because he was a cop, the police didn't even imagine that he could have done it. And they were willing to look the other way in terms of some of the evidence. Peterson actually made just about every mistake one could make in this situation. He killed people that he would have a motive to kill. In the case of Kathleen, there was disputes about custody and money, like division of assets in their divorce. So there was a motive, and he should have known that he would be the chief suspect from the start. He staged the crime scene in a way that should not have fooled anybody. He told his wife at the time, Stacy, that he did it, right? So he involved essentially somebody he was trying to make a conspirator after the fact. Also, after getting away with murder, he decided to kill again and again, chose somebody where there was a clear motive. When he killed Stacy, he asked for the assistance of his stepbrother, an individual who had difficulty regulating emotions. Now, it's possible that Peterson thought he could exploit that, but still, he really couldn't have lifted 120 pounds without assistance. There was no need to involve anyone else. And again, we see the lack of insight. He didn't look at Thomas Morphy and say, because this guy has difficulty regulating emotions, I wonder if I should trust him for this high-pressure task. So if we look at this, we see behavior that could be consistent with both narcissism and psychopathy. Behaviors that align with grandiose narcissism. Peterson was extroverted, manipulative, deceitful, arrogant, and attempted to be charming. He was also energetic and likable. In terms of psychopathy, he was impulsive, aggressive, he lacked empathy, he lacked remorse, and we see a failure to take responsibility. Now, this just isn't in a legal sense. In some ways, it's understandable that somebody who's charged with a crime is going to avoid accepting responsibility, because then they're really removing all doubt and they're going to be found guilty. But even if we look at something like him saying that he regrets getting married, like he didn't cause all this, so just really failing to take any ownership of anything that he did. Grandiose narcissism and psychopathy are both characterized by low neuroticism. Peterson was able to conceal his involvement in the murders without worry, without anxiety, calmly going through the motions. So I think this is a good juxtaposition here between Peterson and Thomas Morphy, right? So Peterson's calm. He does all this really, again, without concern. And Morphy has major difficulty coping with the stress of even his relatively limited involvement in this crime compared to what Peterson did. So in stepping back and looking at all of Peterson's behavior, these behaviors could align with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. I think that neither of Peterson's murders, assuming he committed both, were planned far in advance. They may not have been planned at all. Peterson was so confident and arrogant, he thought he could just kill and fabricate and destroy evidence to cover it up. The whole custody situation and division of assets with Kathleen, may have led to whatever dispute occurred right before her murder. With Stacy, he didn't have the same types of difficulties. Perhaps it was simply a regular argument, like a routine argument that they had frequently, the same type of argument over and over, and he just lost control. It could have also been a situation where Stacy threatened to turn Peterson in. So we see that by Stacy hiding the information about Kathleen's murder, she really made a key mistake. When she found out that Peterson killed Kathleen, she should have left at the earliest moment when she could do so safely and gone directly to the police. If he killed Kathleen, then it's not much of a stretch to think that he would kill her. It reminds me of one of those sayings about infidelity. If somebody's cheating with a married person, we hear this phrase, if they will cheat with you, they will cheat on you. It seems pretty clear that one shouldn't trust a murderer, no matter who they killed and for what reason. We see more evidence of impulsivity here with this murder for hire plot against the prosecutor. So, okay, he thought the prosecutor was going to charge him with Stacy's death, but didn't he realize that there was more than one prosecutor? Did he think that eliminating that prosecutor would eliminate the risk of him being charged? It really doesn't make sense. Again, it's like he wasn't quite connecting with how things work. So one last point I'll make here is just kind of a general point about the name Peterson and high-profile cases, right? It struck me as I was working on this that we have Drew Peterson, that I've talked about here, Michael Peterson from the famous staircase murders. I did a video about him. And we have Scott Peterson. I did a video about him as well some time ago. So we see three men who were convicted of murdering their wives, all with the last name Peterson. I don't think it means anything. It's just interesting how that kind of happened. It also means that it gets a little confusing, I think, to people when they're talking about these cases. It's easy to mix up those first names, especially, I think, between Drew Peterson and Scott Peterson. I think the Michael Peterson case is a little less known, although it did have a Netflix special about it that was quite extended and pretty good, although I think it was a little biased toward Michael Peterson. I know whenever I talk about high-profile cases, there will be a variety of opinions. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.